All right, I'm going to do a video now for my students, one in particular who had a question about harmonics, something we don't always have enough time to really get into with lessons, and so I'm trying to be brief with it but give you the general idea, and I want you to be able to see it across between the double bass and also the electric bass. It's the same thing. The harmonic series is something that you should be aware of. So read about it, look it up, because it exists on all musical instruments. It's very important to understand. It's a function of math, and it also manifests itself in terms of timbre, in terms of sound with the instrument. So let's get started. So any vibrating column of air or a string is an example of such. Will have various what's called partials that are all existing above the basic sound of that vibrating column of air, which we typically would call the fundamental. So we hear the fundamental when we play our open strings, and but that we know that these other notes exist in between. So when we exist above it. So when we take a look at an open G string, now we find these notes by touching very lightly the string. We don't press it to the fingerboard, we just touch it enough that we'll get another note. And let's just see how they go up. The first idea is to divide the string in half. So you're basically, if it were a bass guitar, it would be 12th fret. You're basically halfway down the middle of the string. So listen to what happens. I had to find it myself. That's what we're going to call the first partial. It's what is called the first partial. It divides the string in half, and we get the same note one octave above. So another G an octave above. Now what happens is, as we divide the string into smaller and smaller portions, we can go in either direction. In other words, we can go this way and touch lightly, or we can do the same thing up here. So essentially it's fanning in both directions from the center point. So, and both are useful for the double bass player for sure. So be aware of both of them. Let's just now move forward and watch how they develop. So the next partial, the second partial, would be dividing the string into thirds. So we have a D above that G. When we divide it into fourths, we have another G, one octave above that G. So the note, you need to learn what note it's over a normally played note. So the pitch C, I'm in second position, that will give me that note. Now when I continue up, we won't go too far because there are more notes higher up, but that's the next partial, that's the fourth partial, so that's a major third above. Interestingly, you're dividing the string into 5 parts. So you would think that maybe there are some other places where the note would exist, and indeed there are. It's there, it's there. So you've got 4 different points to divide it into 5 parts. 6 parts, that's the 5th partial. And that's about as far as we're going to go for this video. There's a bunch of notes above it, so look it up. But basically you have the fundamental, first partial, second partial, third, fourth, fifth, and then sixth is this minor 7th. It's a little out of tune. So of course then that relationship is going to exist on the other strings. So our first order of business, and it's going to be on the harder to get it to come out. Now, as you would imagine, it's also going to exist up higher. Now, they'll be kind of all over the place because of the different mathematical divisions, but one thing for sure is they all exist right here. So that's that same G that I would have played in second position. So, and they actually come out a little easier. They're a little brighter up here. So both systems are used. The Italians in general, and for concerto work, it would make more sense for it to be up here. I'm not going to talk about that so much in this video, but just to know that anything that you can do down here that I'm about to show you, you can also do up here. So let's dial in a little bit on what's going on in this area. The reason I'm emphasizing this is because it relates to the notes that we know in the more common area of the instrument, and especially for improvisation, jazz playing, etc. It's very useful to have these super high bell-like tones available when you're down here playing a note. And as we'll see on electric bass, this was of course brought to everyone's attention by the great Jaco. So well, let's keep going. So now we have this idea of a triad. It's a pretty stable. So when we take a look at those notes, look at them on a sheet of music paper. You have E, G sharp B, A, C sharp B, etc. When you connect them, you'll see that you get a sort of a scale. So if I start at the very top of this, of course the top would be here. Now there's a C I can get with that 6 partial, but for now if we just skip that, we go right to B. Oops. So that's the key notes I want you to have awareness of. I messed up there. So E, G sharp, A, B, there it is. And those are taken up in Simandl Book 2. He has some nice little etudes based on that. Here's a bit of one. There's that 6. So you can do a lot with that. I enjoy using those in lots of different ways. And it's similar to some of the stuff that we hear Jaco doing on the electric bass, and I'll show you how we do it over there. But basically, in terms of the bow, you just have to realize that, like where my bow is right now to play a C, I'm going to have to move a little closer to the bridge to get it to come out. So, and get used to playing them across. So at the octave, at the 4th position, the 7th fret. So that's just the general lay of land with the natural harmonic. There's another type of harmonic on the double bass used in solo playing, and that's the false harmonics is the usual word. It's interesting just to kind of point out, and we can only do that when we play in thumb position. So what's going to happen here is we're stopping a note with the thumb, and then we're going to lightly touch at one of these nodes. So the most obvious one, so that's the equivalent of that over an open G string. So when you work on this, and it's a lot of work, you can play scales or whatever. Now that would technically be the 2nd partial off of the thumb being the fundamental. The 3rd partial would then be a lot of people like to play there because the note that your thumb is playing is the same note that you're hearing 2 octaves above. It's the same as that. They're a little more hard to come out, a little more difficult. So there's an example of rotating 2nd and 3rd, and above it is the 5th partial. Needless to say, that's pretty virtuosic and not something we're mainly going to be wanting to worry about right now. I would just encourage you to really get used to where these are. Experiment. Sometimes they're even helpful in really helps get your bearings in the upper to hear the higher note helps intonation to connect. play a lower note, like I just played that C, if it's well in tune, see, so basically that one. You can get some of the higher harmonics to ring. So that concludes the first part of this. Now let's go look at the electric bass now and see what we can do with that. But I like you to see them. I like you to see them really as related, really extensions of each other. So being comfortable with the basics of that Simandl etude that I mentioned from book 2, those etudes will really be helpful. The ballet has some etudes that are up in the higher, and that's great. I didn't want to deal with that right now, but those are beautiful, really much actually more musical. So now with this thing, it's the same harmonic series as existing. So when I cut it down the middle, I slice the pie down the middle. There it is, and it's gonna be up there. So the main thing is I want you to see where those triads are. So it's the same thing. It's just the same thing that what Simandl had, the Simandl etude. Oops, let's try that again. Really hard to get that one to speak. But anyway, that's the basic idea of it. Now on this instrument, we were bowing close to the bridge. Well, as you might gather, we pick close to the bridge. And if you've got a pickup like this right on the bridge, that would be what Jaco did with the jazz bass. Pretty much, I think, just use that pickup probably all the time, or mostly, at least. That gives you the color. If I just have the neck pickup, it's actually not bad. That's the split pickup there. These are Bartolini's. They're a little more, so you can still get it. But at any rate, it's a little easier. But the main thing is the technique. If I, it hardly speaks. But if I come there, it comes out for sure. And then get into, and obviously transcribe some of what Jaco did. Just that sound right there. He discovered that. That's so cool. Adam Novick did a book years ago, Harmonics for Electric Bass. That's wonderful. It's got a lot of materials. But everything we're talking about here is just coming out of these same natural harmonics that have always been on the bass. And it's in all instruments. Trumpet player plays open. That's how trombone players play. It's all connected. That's the beautiful part of it. So when you're looking at this at the instrument, I like how these when you bring in some other notes that are not harmonics, it's nice to know that this harmonic, that's a B, that's the fourth partial, 2, 3, sorry, it's the fifth partial, close, fifth partial, that's also right there. It actually comes out easier, as I saw a fellow on YouTube explaining. This rings even a little easier, a little more work there. We generally tend to play it there, but you might be here when you want to play, oh wow, C major 7th, so you've got B and F sharp. C sharp would be a little outside, but possible. Could be. So anyway, that's that technique. The other technique that I want you to have an understanding of it is the equivalent of the false harmonic. So if you remember on the double bass, we put the thumb down, and the thumb was the fundamental, and then the first the harmonic was usually the second partial or possibly the third, or boy, I'm getting myself confused. Third, fourth, or fifth partials is what it normally is. But on this instrument, we're going to do this with the right hand. So this is more of a guitar technique. So with the bass, I think what most people do, at least this is what works for me, is this kind of a technique. Let's just start with the idea, figure out where the natural harmonics are. Remind yourself, I should say. So there's the first partial, second, and notice that it's also up here. And see if you can play those now with this hand. So the idea, the technique is basically a harp kind of technique. you're touching with the thumb at the node. It's hard to see where the frets were on this bass. You can sort of see it's dark. So I'm just using, you could use a third, or you could do that. I'm not trying to play that fast. And then go up to the next point. And then go up to the next point. You gotta you'll get a sense. I still don't know where it is. There it is. So obviously that's equivalent of right there. That would be the second, third, fourth partial. So now what you're going to do is you're going to keep track of what you're doing with the left hand while with the right hand as you're playing various things. So for example, let's just play an A flat. So if we play that A flat, see, we're right there and we've got that one. And now I could go up here, but it makes more sense to go this way. So I'm still fretting an A flat, and now I'm getting the pitch E flat. Basically that's enough, really. So what happens is, and Jocko did this a lot, like Birdland is an example, I'm pretty sure that's what he must have been doing. So if you just played a chromatic scale, and then you did it here, and obviously you have to keep straight that you're playing some other note. I'm playing E flat, E flat, and so forth, but I'm fretting an A flat. It's a little weird, but this one, now I'm playing an A flat 2 octaves above. That might be a little easier to keep straight. So it's a whole technique, but that's the basic thing. So you're imitating a guitar player. Thumb holds the note, it lightly touches, and the plucking is done usually with first finger. I feel weaker with third. I use third all the time elsewhere, but not here. I just do it all there. So that's it. That's the whole video. So see it as one common thing. Oh, I know the last thing I wanted to mention. Let's go back to the fiddle, and we may want to play these things pizzicato on the double bass. So I want you to see that. So when we were playing electric bass, we obviously got closer to the bridge. But with this, it's the opposite. So in other words, that's going to be pretty ugly. It could work for certain kinds of things. But in general, the technique is to pick up here, close to the thumb. It's light. Callus on your thumb. So then when you're combining like you do on the electric, that's the idea with that. It pops out a lot better, and it doesn't make a big nasty, I may like that actually, but so that's your introduction to harmonics. Samandal Book 2 has that information. The belay, let's see, here's my bow. Let me just show you a little bit of that before I split. Because up here, try that again. Beginning of this particular belay etude. I forget the volume. I think it's 304. I have to check. Let's see. They're brighter. And you get the higher ones come out a lot easier there. Like if I tried to play that here, I like the sound. It's a little darker. Wow. It's a little risky. It's easier to go, comes out a little bit easier there. But it's really just two sides of the same coin. But of course it's opposite, because you have to get used to it, because when you're going up the scale, you're going that way here, but obviously this is more like what you're used to. You're gonna go closer to the bridge when a note goes higher. That's it. Let me know if you have any questions. This was a very loose video I just wanted to do for my students. I may redo it later, like everything. There might be a take two, but hope you found this helpful, and obviously anytime you have any questions. So I wish you the best. Thanks. Bye-bye.